What is going on, everybody? James Hancock here, back to offer my first thoughts on the first 3 episodes of Season 2 of Jessica Jones. I was debating whether or not to do a full season review or to break it into pieces, and I opted for this just because I feel like sometimes my reviews of Netflix shows get distorted by the fact that around episode 7, 8, 9, or 10, I tend to get so exhausted that I think it negatively impacts my impression of the show. And in that this show is 13 episodes long, I figured why not break it into some bite-sized chunks so that I can appreciate it more fully and savor it if I do end up becoming a big fan of it. I'm a Marvel junkie and I thoroughly enjoyed Jessica Jones Season 1. I think Jessica Jones Season 1, Luke Cage, and Daredevil Season 2, they remain the strongest shows that Netflix and Marvel have done together. I don't think anyone out there really loves Iron Fist or The Defenders, but The Punisher was pretty damn good. Seems like with the future of Marvel and Netflix's relationship a little bit in doubt, some of the quality is starting to be a little bit more inconsistent with their shows. For those of you who don't know, Disney is starting to launch their own Disney-branded streaming service, and they've basically said all the current Marvel shows that are on Netflix, they want to see them have a nice, long, healthy run, but that any future Marvel characters being adapted for television will most likely not be for Netflix, but will be instead for Disney's branded service. My hope is that Marvel basically doesn't let these characters kind of die on the vine because they're now associated with Netflix. I hope they'll just basically continue their stories back on their own platform, but that's all corporate maneuvering as opposed to storytelling. So let's focus instead for the time being on Season 2 of Jessica Jones. Due to my deep, abiding love and affection for the character of Jessica Jones, I'm rocking out my soul leather jacket in her honor. There's something about Jessica Jones' look that it might be my favorite superhero outfit of any character on a superhero television show. Apparently, when Krysten Ritter first went in to audition for the part, she basically admitted that blue jeans and a leather jacket and boots were basically her uniform every day anyway, so this character is not much of a stretch for her, but I feel like Krysten Ritter was born to play this part. I first became a fan of this character back in the early 2000s. Brian Michael Bendis wrote this incredible 28-issue run from 2001 to 2004, and it basically defined the character as we know her. And what was cool is that at that time, Marvel used to do this thing called the Max line, and the Max line was sometimes characters with the Hulk or Thor or Luke Cage, but they were basically superhero stories for adults. But what was cool about Alias is that Jessica Jones was a brand new character being created for this line. And Brian Michael Bendis basically made up a 60s style origin in terms of how she got her powers, but also had a very compelling reason as to why she had retired from being a superhero many years back. And if you're a fan of Season 1 or Season 2 of Jessica Jones, you'll absolutely love the comics. The same format with Jessica Jones performing investigations, along with all the hard drinking and hard fucking and hard cussing that we associate with the character. One of my biggest criticisms of Bendis' handling of the character after that initial run is that he softened her as he brought her into kind of the mainstream Marvel universe. And for me, what makes Jessica Jones so interesting as a character is that she's the definition of a hardworking, hard-drinking New Yorker whose life is always in a state of total chaos, but along the way, she manages to do a lot of good. And I feel like this show does a really good job of capturing that aspect of her personality and what it's like to live in New York. I've lived in New York for almost 10 years now, and I absolutely love the city to pieces. And I feel like that's what keeps me coming back to these Netflix Marvel shows, is they really capture New York in a really compelling way. Writer-producer Melissa Rosenberg, who also created the show, very wisely kind of steers into the dark side of New York, as opposed to trying to depict a soft and fuzzy version of the city. There are so many superhero movies out there these days, and a lot of them are geared toward a more young, innocent sensibility. Early on in the season, we have a situation where Jessica's in her usual bar getting loaded, and as she walks out, some douchebag compliments her ass in kind of a greasy way, and ordinarily under normal circumstances, somebody would accuse him of being a terrible misogynist, blah, blah, blah. Instead, she takes him in the bathroom for a quick bonk. He turns out to be a little overly talky and a little bit too douchey for her taste, so she has to kind of wrap things up prematurely. But it's a pretty hardcore, aggressive sex scene in a bathroom stall. In New York, a lot of drug abuse and a lot of sexual activity takes place in bathroom stalls at bars. So I like the fact that Melissa Rosenberg is not trying to turn a blind eye to the dark side of New York City. But even darker is the character of Jerry Hogarth, played by Carrie-Anne Moss. Early on in the season, she learns that she's suffering from a really horrible degenerative disease, and she decides to go off and raise some hell and get some of her anger out of her system. She basically has this drunken, drug-fueled foursome with 3 prostitutes where they just go absolutely bananas for a couple days. I mean, this is not the kind of stuff you're going to see on The Flash or even on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. on ABC. I mean, ABC and Netflix have very different worldviews when it comes to what a superhero show should be all about. And from what I can gather so far, having only seen the first 3 episodes, this is basically about filling in the gaps in Jessica Jones's origin. She has 20 missing days from the time 17 years back where she got in an accident that killed her family, and it's a period of time where at the end she discovered that she had enhanced strength, enhanced abilities, etc. And it seems like the show is doing a little bit of rewriting of Jessica Jones's official origin from the comics, but that's totally fine. Originally, Jessica Jones had kind of a 60s style accident, much like what happened to Daredevil or much like what happened to Spider-Man. But if they want to flesh out her origin story and bring in some interesting characters, I'm all for it. I read one review which has some spoilers, and I don't want to offer a spoiler here in that it's about an episode that I haven't seen, but I know there's a villain who shows up later in the season who's one of my favorite 80s villains from the comics, who's involved in the creation of a lot of different cool supervillains. But I have to say, so far, I think this season is a slight step down from the previous one. Season 1 really benefited from having a horrifying villain. I think you can easily make a case for Kilgrave being one of the best villains Marvel's ever put on the screen, whether that's the small screen or the large screen. And so far, 3 episodes in, a great compelling villain has yet to emerge. And I feel like in superhero movies or superhero comics, heroes can only really be measured by the degree to which their villains seem impossible to defeat, but also equally charming in their own right. And I feel like David Tennant absolutely hit a complete total home run in season 1. But I do have 10 episodes left to go, so who knows? Maybe a brilliant villain will emerge. But even like in Luke Cage or in Daredevil Season 2, the villains emerged pretty early on. I think it's a mistake to withhold a great villain if you've got one in your back pocket. Even if the story as written so far is less interesting, Krysten Ritter is absolutely still hitting home runs. She's so damn funny and so damn tough and so engaging and so charismatic. So much so that the show kind of falls to pieces when she's not on the screen. There are a lot of subplots in this season dealing with her best friend Trish. And Trish's problems with her career and her relationship with her boyfriend are just really dull in comparison to the daily routine of Jessica Jones. I'm not really interested in any subplot in this story that doesn't involve Jessica Jones or whatever antagonist she might be matching wits with. Jessica's assistant, Malcolm, is also struggling a little bit to have any relevance whatsoever. I know the character from the comics, and I know he's an important part of Jessica's story, but they really need to find a way to make Malcolm relevant. The show Daredevil struggles a little bit as well with the character of Foggy. Foggy's a major character from the comics, and he even has a nice little cameo here, I think in episode 3, but I'm having a really hard time caring about Foggy Nelson at all in the world of Netflix so far. We also get an additional Marvel cameo from the character The Wizard. It's quite a different interpretation of the character from Marvel Comics, but The Wizard goes way back to like 1940. He was basically Marvel Comics' answer to The Flash, or you could say a blatant ripoff. But as a lot of people have pointed out, any character who's totally yellow and is called The Wizard, all you're going to do is think about P every time he appears in a panel or on the screen. They've manipulated his origin a little bit, turned him into this giant fat guy who's basically falling to pieces and going insane. He even makes a little reference to Spider-Man when he says, with great power comes great mental illness, or something to that effect. So I always enjoyed these little Marvel cameos, but I would say 99.999% of comic book readers out there have probably never even read an issue with the Wizard. But for people out there who want to read more about him, there was a debate ongoing for a while as to whether or not Wizard had anything to do with the parentage of Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, or was it possibly Magneto? There's been a lot of revisionist history when it comes to those characters, and at one point the Wizard was very much involved on that front. In any case, I'm enjoying the show so far. I think it's a very solid show. It's definitely better than The Defenders, way better than Iron Fist, but it's not quite at the level of the creme de la creme of Netflix. I mean, I would say that's definitely season 2 of Daredevil, Luke Cage, Jessica Jones, and The Punisher. I feel like those shows are definitely Marvel and Netflix putting their best foot forward. But fingers crossed, I'm hoping that the show will redeem itself over the next 10 episodes. I got a long way to go. So for now, I would just say, if you are a hardcore Marvel Netflix fan, you don't need to watch my review because you're already watching the show. You're probably already finished the show. But if you're on the fence about whether or not you want to add another 13 hours of superhero action into your life, when we've got so many superhero movies and so many superhero shows out there to choose from, so far, at least in the first 3 episodes, Jessica Jones Season 2 is not required viewing. It's very enjoyable, but it's not required viewing. So I'm going to wrap this sucker up and get back to watching the show. Hope you enjoyed my reaction and review so far. Please consider giving my channel a subscribe. I would really appreciate it. And if you want to talk more, you can find me on Twitter at Colbrax, or just leave me a comment in the comments below. But I'll be back at y'all later on this weekend to tackle Ash vs. Evil Dead Season 3, Episode 3, as long as some other movies, hopefully. And as always, I greatly appreciate the support for this channel. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great weekend.